Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Bill Draghi with Turnkey Technologies, and I'd like to show you a little bit about Microsoft Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. You saw a bit of the other Microsoft offerings, and there's a lot of commonality. Obviously, we're built on a lot of the same tools, which is good for any of the Microsoft customers because they'll be able to take advantage of these integrated applications. So just to show you a bit where we sit in finance and operations, we're on the same kind of grid. And the line that connects all these is a few things inside Microsoft stack, which is the common data model and a process called flow, where you can move data. If you have these various applications, you can seamlessly move data between them. So finance operations sits out there with the ability to connect to talent, which is a HR recruiting capability application. Retail operation, if you're specifically focused in retail applications, you're a retailer basically, and you want to do point of sale and you have those kind of transaction sets going on, then they can integrate back to finance operations, and then your back-end system ERP is finance operations. You can manage your finances and your inventories and your database from the finance operation ERP. Marketing as well, field service, which is another unique kind of offering that's for service organizations that have repairs going on out in the field, and they need scheduling, and they need the uniqueness there related to that business. Customer service scenarios where you're specifically focused on service, and then sales, which is kind of a play embedded in a CRM application that allows your salespeople to be strictly focused on sales and develop sales transactions and then populate them back into finance and operations to be fulfilled basically and to be processed into the ERP and accounting systems. So again, around that sits the Internet of Things and the other applications there that will allow you to use the AOT and various intelligence pieces. I think the big thing that we want to make sure that I want to make sure that I express to you is that these offerings can be cloud-based, and particularly the finance and operations ERP is a cloud-based solution primarily. We're moving towards a split or a hybrid scenario where you could do on-prem and in the cloud, but I think we want to make mention of some of the benefits of that application in the cloud, which is basically you have no system maintenance scenarios there. The system is fairly dynamic in terms of its ability to handle volumes, expand when you need volume and when you need machine power and when you need data data storage, those types of things. So basically you're connecting via a browser through the cloud and into the your database that's stored on the cloud. So some of the things there again is it's a native cloud, so any browser can connect. Redundancy, it's backed up and maintained for you. Any device can connect to these things in the cloud, and then again the whole Active Directory integration there, which gives you the security there. So again, the high performance and then disaster recovery and scenarios and high-level security. So Microsoft's invested billions of dollars in the Azure cloud to allow for these capabilities, and particularly overwhelmingly the security capability of being in the Azure cloud. Really what I'm going to talk about too then is these particular focuses of D365 Finance and Operations, the industries that we basically will play in as a focal point: manufacturing, retail, as I mentioned, service industries, the public sector, as we talked about public accounting a bit, and distribution. So a lot of organizations have multiple distribution centers and various ways that they go to market with their products would support all of those kind of concepts there. So then underneath that, there's basically these individual pieces. They're a little small in terms of the PowerPoint here, but budgeting, finance capability, human resource payroll, procurement and sourcing, cost management, production, as we talked about. I'm going to talk a bit, and kind of distinguishes this product as project management. I'm going to get to talk a little bit about that for your service organizations and your general projects control and costing in terms of managing those projects, either internal projects or external projects, customer-based projects. So intelligent insight is productive experience, the cloud, and you can connect anytime. So you have 24/7 up time on the cloud. That's another scenario that's a great benefit to the cloud deployment. The other piece is there's kind of an endorsement here from a manager at TGI Fridays, which is the consistent UI across the desktop. So Dynamics 365, Finance and Operations, as well as Business Central and GP has been displayed, have this common integration with Office 365. So the big issue that you see in some of these, some of the pundits in terms of ERP applications is they generally talk about a dip in productivity when you move into a new application, go through a new implementation of a software product. That happens very little, if any, with Dynamics 365 products because they're already integrated to Office 365. The look and feel is going to be common. The ability to roll out that product and have users just adapt a lot quicker and find things quicker is going to be much easier through a D365 offering. And that's the statement basically that the TGI Fridays manager is making here. The other scenario here, or the other feature that is important to recognize from D365 Finance and Operations, that it's a global product. It offers global capabilities. In terms of that, I'm talking about multi-companies, set up and manage individual companies with different data structure, different data, segregated by the company so that you can do different things with data, have different costing structures, different pricing structures related to companies that way, all within these what's called a legal entity. Multi-currency capability, so if you do transact business across countries, they'll do a currency reconciliation and exchange and update that for the local currency to, if you're dealing with foreign vendors or foreign customers, will bring that into the local currency that you define for that entity. Multi-language capability, I'll show you a little bit of that. I'm going to get into the demo here in the live environment. I may be in a office here in the Midwest. Another employee may be in Mexico speaking Spanish. We can customize the local environment for that particular user to be in Spanish so that his presentation of his applications are all in Spanish. Multi-localization, so you can have multiple countries. I just give you an example of just the two countries that we were familiar with doing a few customers in that exact scenario. And then the intercompany processing, so you can do transactions across these companies even though they're in different currencies, they're in different time zones, they're in different market spaces. Okay, so I want to get in and show you a little bit of navigation around this to show you again that so now I'm in the live environment, and one of the things that I wanted to show you quickly is that I have a presentation here that allow me to do basically what we call workspaces. So here's the full display, if you will. I'm going to talk in a second about roles and security based on roles, but quickly I'm up in a particular, as my particular user. You see I'm getting my picture there, as bad as that is, but in my user options I can populate what are my color schemes, what do I want to do here, what are my preferences here. I talked about localization in terms of country, region, what language do I want to display, again what dominant or what's my primary company or entity that I'm going to be associated with. So it brings me into that scenario every time I log in. From there, then a lot of the navigation, I can cross companies if I have the security to do that. So I can drop down and go across. I want to come out of, I'm in the USMF company, which is a manufacturing entity that I'll show you about, but I can go into the Contoso Retail or Contoso Entertainment, these other companies that might be sister companies of USMF or inside of the same corporate entity, but I want to do some transactions across in the other entity. and then capability all along the way to do just if I want to go to a certain product or certain application, maybe I want to go to my mobile device display and can populate that. It's basically a search to find an application and then drill to it. The other capability here is we have the Workspaces, which I was just showing you there, and then there's the capability to go in a whole module kind of a look, which will give you more presentation. And then also to any of these that you've been in and out of, over time it'll capture, where you've been last so that you can go back to it, and then also you can establish those as favorites by just clicking them and making them a favorite. And then you can just work off of favorites. So it looks a little daunting from the main presentation, but again, as I get into the basic workspaces, they get very focused. So what's this all about? This is all about productivity. Again, how do I get my employees, my users focused? Where do I put them into the applications that they're in? The classic 80-20 rule. 80% of the time I'm doing the same 20 applications. So I want to be focused there. I want to have my measurements. Again, this is where the interface with our productivities, KPI measurements, Power BI will be, they'll sit inside these workspaces so that they'll measure the performances of these particular applications, based on what the user's focused on. One I typically would show is the credit and collections application workspace. So quickly, if I'm managing accounts receivable, I'm focused, where are my receivables? What periods are they in? How do I collect on these things? How do I get focused to go there? Again, very interactive here. I can see any amount and whatever period I want to go to, and then I can quickly click on that. Looks like most of this is overdue, but I can click through that, and that'll display the actual invoices that are in that period, and I can start to work those invoices. I can start to do actions for collection calls, do write-offs, do the various pieces that I would do in accounts receivable collections capability to work my job functions right there through the workspace. I'm going to just jump back for my PowerPoint for a second. And the other piece I talked about, and I think it's been a common theme across the Microsoft products we've been talking about this morning, is role-based security. So this is basically an easy part of the implementation, or it makes it a much more productive, efficient part of an implementation to take your users, assign them to a role that's basically got, again, 80-95% of a fit in terms of what they do on a regular basis, and that will assign all the security that's required for them, give them all the presentation and app access to all the applications that they require. Now, you can customize that at an extensive level here. You can assign multiple roles. As you can see in this particular example, I've got receivable clerk, collections, general employee. Some of your users may wear multiple hats in your organization. They may be doing some procurement. They may be doing some sales. So those roles could be added as well to an individual user. So again, just technically what happens, this user logs in. With his login, he gets to assign these roles, and that's his presentation capability. Again, the workspace capability we talked about, it's a focus for productivity. It's a focus for, whatever you want to call it, work harder, work smarter, not harder, and get focused on what your application, what your functionality in your organization is so that you can drive better performance. And again, the key KPI measurements are displayed related to the workspace so that you can keep an eye on the things that are important to you, and again, get focused on those items that give more return to the organization. The Power BI, again, we've talked about this across the different products. Power BI is again integrated into the 365 finance and operations, again, embedded in the workspaces. What I want to show you here a little bit is this is where we can deliver some standard Power BI presentations, again, localized to your data. So it's presenting your data. This is just some general sample data, but it would generate based on your sales, on your organization's transactions, so that would output these, and these measurements in terms of the graphic presentations of the data can be then tuned. So you can take the sample, use it, and then tune it and customize it to your own. So in terms of what type of visualization you want to use, you can change these. You can create your own new. Here's the capability. I think everyone's kind of familiar with filtering and field selection. So, you know, what fields of information you want to show from this data, what filters you want to have. Do you want to look at certain types of transactions, certain types of industries and these kinds of scenarios, and highlight those and customize the look and feel and focus and embed it then on the workspace. So here's, you know, another look at it from large scale, and a lot of these operations can then be drilled down. So what happens is in finance and operations, you get an ability to have a Power BI desktop where you can actually go in and do these kinds of customizations. You can also do the drill downs. And then the other thing about it, if you move into this area, into the desktop, you can query the data. You can start to ask, okay, I didn't construct this exactly how I'm seeing, how I want to see the data, but I want to go ahead and ask some questions. I want to ask some questions. What industries are my highest? What customers are my highest if not presented in this organization? So you can ask a question and query the data from the Power BI analytics to get more specific or one-time focus related to that data. Again, the data can be pointed on from a lot of different areas. So we can say, I want to go get data in the Power BI application, and then you can point it to either your data that's coming from the cloud, that's in the finance and operations ERP to develop and created from that, or you can point to local Excel data or other databases. You can connect various databases to pull and consolidate reporting across different stacks. So if you do have a different, you know, some kind of production facility on a different software piece or some other piece that's outsourced somewhere, you can get to that data, pull it together, and consolidate it into a business analytics inquiry in Power BI. The other piece that we kind of talked about it too, and again, this is around the theme of productivity and access, is the integration to an Excel add-in. So here I want to show you just basically an example, and I'll do this live. It is in a general journal. I want to dump this journal out. I'm starting to build a journal maybe with some postings. This could be a you know, payroll entry or some kind of adjusting entry. You can dump out the journal to Excel, populate it in Excel, and then post it back. So basically the Excel add-in that some of you may be familiar with already, I can dump the existing data that I have from the ERP, populate this then with additional data, and then publish it back into the ERP. So those of you that like to work in Excel or have some need there to maybe do some cut and paste or convert some data from outside sources into a format that will then be able to be published back up into the ERP. So all the applications that I think Chris and Jeremy have talked about to this point in terms of general ERP applications are all D365 finance and operations capable. It includes all of those and extends that even further. So here I just want to talk about some of the financial management pieces: accounts payable, receivable, budgeting, cash and bank, compliance, cost accounting, which has a nice piece and functionality there to track your cost, in particular in manufacturing, production facilities, fixed assets, general ledger, project management. I'm going to focus a little bit more on there because that is a little bit of a distinguisher here for the finance and operations product. And then the public sector accounting, which has got a flavor in some of the other products, but a little more robust in finance and operations. So first one is budgeting. So the big piece here, and what I've seen in my experience in doing implementations over the years, a lot of people don't budget because of they lack the tools to pull it together. And basically that's the ability to budget down to various cost centers and various sub-levels, subgroups in your organization to do that. Finance and operation provides a very nice tool to roll up budgets from various levels and consolidate that budget and use that throughout the organization. So the big picture in budgeting is the creation of the budget, actually doing the budget planning, if you will, and that's where some nice tools we have, plan documents, have a workflow capability. I'm going to talk about workflow as well as again, that's kind of a central theme in these Microsoft products, the ability to check data and track data as it goes through the organization for both accuracy and that it's been approved. So here we can start a budget plan, have it track, put a timeline on it, and have the system let us know, whoever's managing that budget plan, that they have a due date on it and that they have certain issues they need to perform on it. The other piece then, once the plan's in place and approved, is you put it in this register. So now I've got a budget out there, it's registered, and that's what's in play against all my transactions. So that's when budget control comes in, and now say a purchase order or a requisition, internal requisition from an employee is for a certain amount or a certain level, and that triggers a budget check. So at the budget check, somebody says, oh, wait a minute, your organization, according to your budget, is beyond that particular threshold, so we're going to put a checkpoint on that, and that'll have to get approved. So along those lines, what you'll see again here is the budgeting piece and how budget planning might exist and how it goes through initial preparation, departmental requests, a CO review, the various sign-offs along the way, and then finally a budget approval. So this tracks it right through the process. Again, that's typically what I see what keeps people from getting to a budgeting level or significant budgeting level is the ability to do the planning and then do that. Pulling these levels and these components apart. Fixed assets, again, is a nice deep functionality within finance and operations. So we can define the assets, obviously, and the life of the assets, but then we can also identify that we have multiple depreciation schedules you might want to run on that particular asset. So obviously you'll have one that you report to federal government with for your tax reporting, but also then you may have some accelerated pieces and some various different ways you want to look at that assets internally in terms of how you manage that. A nice function inside of the fixed assets is the ability to have all these different types of schedules and then to apply them as you see appropriate to the different assets. Depreciations, capabilities, accelerated and straight lines, and all of these capabilities to do that, and then for the system be able to take that through and calculate the current valuation and also suggest the appropriate depreciation. Beyond this, basically, then you get a kind of a scorecard on an asset. We have an ability, again, I think Chris talked earlier about tying in documents and images, basically a very high level of that in finance and operations ability along with fixed assets to identify what that asset is. A lot of time for insurance purposes and things, you need to have a picture of that asset and understand what to understand where the value of it is, whether it's been damaged or not or being done. So quickly we can run an asset scorecard, if you will, here and tell you, based on these various depreciation schedules, what's the valuation of that asset today? And then suggest whatever one you choose to focus and create the actual depreciation calculation for, you can go ahead and run that. And then that can be an automatic posting generalized to a journal into the general ledger to drive your depreciation schedules. So it's a very nice tool, very detailed and very graphic in orientation to allow you to see and maintain asset values. The next piece I just kind of want to talk about is the workflow piece. I think Chris showed you a little bit of that in GP, very much the same in finance and operations. There is the workflow as well in Business Central. I don't want to completely step on the other guy's presentations, but this is a very detailed scenario on a purchase requisition. So I have a particular employee wants to buy a laptop or some HD camera for the production shop, and they create a purchase requisition. It'll automatically drop through a workflow. It'll drop through the various approval pieces. These are all very flexible in terms of that. I mean, you may have something where it's automatically approved, but it's under some dollar or threshold or some valuation there. If it's beyond that, then it has to go through the approval process. You can identify who the approvers are and who the what those steps are. And as you go through it, it can say whether these things got happen. So here's really what it is. End of the day is the audit trail related to the workflow. What triggered the workflow, when, what transaction, who approved it, how to get finalized, and what was the last step of that. And I'll show you some of that in the live environment as well. The other piece that is another kind of a management but a focused scenario inside of finance and operations is alert management. So this is the ability to create an alert anytime data structure changes or additions of data can happen. Additions of transactions or changes or levels of transactions can happen. So this is really a more of a real-time alert. So if something happens, and here my example is I'm in the customer table, and I want to identify anytime someone changes a credit limit on a customer. I'm managing my receivables information and my customer data, and I want to know if somebody changes that. Maybe I've authorized some of the receivable folks to do that, other users, but I want to know that that happens. So basically inside of a table, which is basically a table name, you can identify when these things happen. I want to get notified. I want to be sent either an email or I want to be sent a pop-up on my screen that say this happened real time, and I want to know that, or I might want to go and address that right away if I have some issue with it. So it allows you for the exception-based analysis again. Again, an exception focus through all this. That's what the workspaces do. That's what workflows do. That's what alerts do. Again, get a very good focus. Everybody's focused on their particular KPIs and we're driving towards that. Again, this allows you to do exception-based data issues and not have to have complete data audit reporting turned on in the ERP, which some people do that. It just adds a little bit more of overhead to it if you want to run where you capture every transaction related to every particular table that goes on. The other kind of unique piece here, we talked a bit about it in the other presentations, is human resources, the recruiting, managing benefits, safety and compliance, and payroll. All of this is available in finance and operations as well. These things, I'm going to go back to my live version here if I can for a second. And again, these are all workspaces inside of the ERP. So if I want to go to my personnel management tab and identify, who here's out here, my various worker, who's on leave today, who's out on vacation, or got some scenario whether or not at work today. So very good presentation of this. Allows you to track various people. You can have contractors as well as direct employees identified in the personnel focus. Again, drill down into the individual users, update their information, identify various things that go on with there, tracks all these details, assign workers for positions. One of the real key pieces of this, as you'll see as I kind of walk into some of the other applications around production and project management, is the ability to establish basically what the time schedules are and the values of these employees as we allow them or assign them in as resources into processes, into production processes or project management processes. Then we can carry their overhead burden, if you will, into those processes to understand the costs involved in those processes when these particular or unique employees are applied in those processes. Yeah, and the benefits piece as well, tracking, the customers, or the, employee start dates and the ability to know when they are, what their benefit schedules are, and those types of things are all part of the HR process as well. Let me just go back here. So as I showed you, this is kind of the personnel management, where the departments and the assignments for the individual employees are, how they are, again, being tracked, whether start dates. During the recruiting process, you can have people out there that are potential employees and step them through the process as well. In the payroll side, the ability to have, again, all these employees set up and set in particular payroll schedules, have particular pay cycles and pay periods, and then have the system calculate that payroll calculation for them based on those setups. A big part of what we do, particularly back end, in terms of helping you manage your company's largest manageable assets. We talked a little bit about on the financial side. You have accounts receivable, accounts payable, and then if you're a distributor or you sell product, you want to manage your inventory investments. So inventory management, we've got the ability to track and expedite inbound operations, track quality assurance. So if there's a quality scenario where you bring a product in inbound, you want to test it for its quality, before it becomes part of your inventory or goes through some of your processes. We can set those pieces up and allow you to test and have various tests, use various resources, have various test benches and equipment involved in quality assessments. Inventory activities, and basically when you're moving inventory around, adjusting it maybe from one location to another inside your organization, or consuming it in your own processes. If you had shop supplies and things like that, we would use those in terms of work orders and things to absorb or consume those inside of your own processes. And then outbound operations, you manage in your customer transactions, your outbound sales, your outbound organization deliveries and processes to your customers. So there's some capabilities. This will run a little video in terms of these two outbound, inbound supply chain processes. You'll get copy of this presentation if you request it, and you can go online. We have a lot of links to both the Turnkey website and to the Microsoft sites to allow you to see some of these presentations more in an interactive environment. So one of the things we'll have in terms of supply chain, and typically we talk about is these types of transactions, is the mobile capability to support that. So I've got warehouse folks that are out there doing these receivings and doing these shippings and doing these stock transfers and doing these bin locations, and got people in production that are picking product for work orders to put in their production order requirements from the start to build their bombs, build their products off the bombs. Talked about a minute ago about quality, those type of things. All these things are mobile presentations so that people out that aren't attached to their desk, aren't sitting at their desk, can be moving around inside your organization and be able to access and do these types of transactions. One of the big ones here is the warehouse management capability, deep warehouse management capability that's can be very simple in terms of its process, if that supports your process, or can go deeper. Things like wave picking, things like license plates and consolidations, bin pallet location, consistent notification of the product as it moves through your outbound process from a picking, packing, shipping scenario, and then even creating the outbound shipment container to track that in a process as it goes out to your transportation process, be that your local delivery UPSs or FedEx Express scenarios, or your own delivery on your truck. Will track those things all the way through to completion. The other piece of this and on the outbound delivery is to get signature capture capability. We've got a signature capture scenario where you can identify who's signing for the material and how that embedded in the transaction for history and follow-up. The next piece of this that kind of talk a little bit about is master planning. So this feeds really two scenarios. It's going to feed production facilities if you need to do that. If you want to forecast for production and forecast the number of products you build. So when you get to that, question, am I building or buying? The system can forecast based, here's the things you need to build, and here's the things you need to buy. So we'll talk about this in terms of a master plan. Is it a static kind of plan based on facility and capacity, or can it be a dynamic plan that really works in terms of how your usage moves and how your demand changes, so that it can bump your requirements as your demand, as your market changes. So one of the big things in terms of production and demand forecasting, and this is kind of where again, into the digital transformation focus using the Azure machine learning. So what we can do is take the actual demand forecast, the actual number of usage by SKU, by location, type of scenario, and forecast those based on various different algorithms to get the best fit for the demand that you're seeing, and then measuring that demand over time against your actual. So we'll take this historical forecasting against your actual historic demand and try to blend that pattern. When you see the graphical representation at the bottom, that you see the two lines really start to blend, that's when your forecasting is being the most effective. That's when your actual demand is being supported by your forecasted demand. And that's, with a lot of different valuations in there, a lot of different setups can be done, but once that's done, really the history and the projection of the history to the demand is what drives this. I want to jump back to live environment just for a second again, and I don't want to just make you dizzy with that, but again, the production capability to manage the production floor. I just want to lean in on these two applications a little bit because they are really unique capabilities inside of finance and operations. So we're tracking your production orders, we're tracking who's assigned the resources again. If we have the pictures of the folks there, they're displayed, assigned, and again, along a resource, we're tracking the costing then related to the materials, the resources assigned. These can be unique resources down to the individual employee. They can be general resources in terms of it's a welder or a painter, just an application type scenario there. Again, you can costing those particular resources out so that their costs are being driven into the costing of the production side. So full scenario there. Time and attendance, so we can have these production orders, people log on to their process as they go through each of the workstations in the route as they're doing their production routing, and identify how much time they spent on each of those particular functions inside of the production cycle, and then identify what kind of time, and also identify if there's waste or scenarios involved in each of those types of production cycles and each of those processes involved in the production of material. So then a lot of this is a focus again, what's open jobs, what's production orders to be released. All of our, again, workspaces are going to focus on how do you come in and identify what do I need to do, what's my priority, what I need to focus on to move things through the processes. The next piece I'm going to talk about that's a little neater, and I know I'm going not real deep on some of you folks that are in production, but I wanted to talk a bit about project management. And project management is a tool that allows us to pull together but just before what that did was show, this was a nice Gantt chart, shows you where some of these transactions, where these production orders are, where they're in place, where they're moving towards their timeline, and what stage they're in. You have multiple scenarios where products, multiple pieces and components, routes are involved in the end product, and they're moving along to completion. The project management capabilities allows you to work in a focus around transactions that are designated as a project, if you will. They work in a lot of different industries. You can see here, this is our focus in our industry in software business. We use Microsoft Finance and Operations Project very deeply in Turnkey. So we doing consulting and accounting. We basically base the project, and then every transaction related to that project goes through it. So the billings, the time capture, the expenses, the cost of materials involved in that project are all run through that project. So you can quickly start to see whether these projects are profitable or they're at least on budget to maintain. You can budget at these levels. You can create a budget to the project and measure against budget on each of those. So in other industries beyond our service software industry, you might have marketing and campaigns and you follow through that. You want to identify the costs involved in a campaign for you to reach certain customers in a marketing campaign. Inside of production, you can have orders that get created out of a project. So there's a new customer, he's got a new product that he wants built, a customized product made to order scenario, and you want to build out, okay, here's what it's going to take to design it, here's what it's going to take to get the materials required, and then drop that order right through into manufacturing just as it had come in through a regular sales order scenario. Again, jobs in construction type scenarios and projects where I'm going to go out to a particular job site, I'm going to do my understanding, again, some analysis of it, and there's some cost of my time to do the analysis, then I'm going to have product, then I'm going to have services, then I'm going to have resources involved, track all the costs through that. Also understand whether that project is going to be billed at what levels, time and material, milestone scenarios, where you bill based when you reach certain criteria that you and the customers agree upon as a billing level. Even legal scenarios where you might be a legal office and you want to bill, again, based on certain cases that might be a project, and you bill along the way with certain resources used in that particular project. So what this allows us to do inside the project is to manage and maintain the accounting disciplines and the controls through a project estimation, building and identifying what that project might entail to begin with, and then creating a budget related to that. This is completely integrated with Microsoft Project. If some of you use that tool today, just on a one-off by itself, we can take a Microsoft project and import it into project management inside of finance and operations. So the idea of you doing what we call work breakdown structure, identifying what are the details that are involved in this project, who's going to do this project, what's resources are involved, what's the time frame involved. Those of you that have worked through a project in the past and say Microsoft project, you understand how things are have dependencies and how they work through the process that certain things have to be done first, and they step through them, and then the next part of the project becomes in play as it starts to meet the overall timeline of the project. And again, measuring this project as it goes through the process along the budget lines and revenue lines that you've established. So the project budget management, the resourcing, again, is a big piece. It allows you to interface with the resources we talked a little bit about, personnel management inside of finance and operations. This is a complete integration to that. So if I say I want to add Bill into a project, it's going to look at my schedule, it's going to look at the schedule of the project and understand whether I'm available for that project, or if I am, what's my availability and when can I get to it, maybe want to restructure or reset the timeline on the project to accommodate my schedule. And then time and expense management. So inside the project, you're going to be able to identify what external expenses were involved, if somebody has to travel, if somebody has to go get materials or something outside of the normal scenario, they want to expense that into the project. As well, again, tracking the time and having the ability to keep track of that across the life of the project. So project management, now I'm going to just step back if I can to show you some of this live. And I'm going to jump to my company here that's a little more project oriented. And some of the things I've been kind of talking to you about along this way is to identify, what levels of detail you're going to have in the project. So if we looked at one of these particular ongoing projects and we looked at the work breakdown structure, which is kind of the level of detail that's going to be involved in the project. So if I wanted to expand these, so there are some basic pieces to a project here. This is kind of one of our project formats here, structures. We do project management, we develop software, and then we do quality assurance, or we test and make sure that all that information is, anything that we develop is quality and deliverable to the customer at a level. So you can assign these efforts at certain levels of hours that you do your estimation at, and when your start and end dates in, so you can see that the timeline of the project that runs through there. And then you can go ahead and assign your resources to that, and then the costing of the resources pull into the costing structure of the project so that it can measure that against any project budgets and cost estimations. So you can get the estimated costs and revenues off the project. So this particular project's got a total value of $124,000 in cost and $186,000 in revenue. So that's the margin that we're calculating on this particular project. You can get another view of this basically through project statement. So I'm going to find one with a little more detail in it. To the cycle. Actually, let's do this city manufacturing, and again the project statement. And what it'll do, if we calculate what's going on in the project to date, it'll start to see here's the level of revenues that have been processed through the project already. Here's the costs. Here's the cost of the individual the item levels, and then the value add or additional costs that have been applied in the project, and then the gross margin of that. That's a pretty large project. From that, you can go to see how was that consumed, and how much of that revenue was generated from hours, from cost materials, labor costs, expenses that were built through item level consumption, and then the total consumption accumulation of all of that. So these are just kind of some quick looks in terms of the ability to see how a project's moving in an overall view. And then again, we can set these things to track at different levels in terms of, are we billing hours, are we billing expenses and items and things that can all be unique based on a particular project. So it quickly gives you the ability to start a project, bill the customer via the project. So we have a complete history underneath the project of everything that's inside of that's going on in that project. The other piece of this is that makes it a little easier to initiate and start a project is the ability to build project templates. So typically, most of your organizations, you would kind of do repeat type projects, right? You have a specialty scenario in our business of software implementations. So we'd have a template related to, say, one of our three products, GP, Business Central, or Finance and Operations. So we would have a template that says, here's the normal processes that go into one of those projects, and we would build that into a template so that we could quickly create a new project, apply the template, and 80–90% of our work breakdown would be applied into that project. So it's easy once you establish. Some projects can go through a couple iterations of your types of projects to then store those projects, create them as templates, and then use that again in an efficient way to continue to do projects and continue to create and start new projects. And then again, all the details, all the history that went on inside the project invoices that were represented through this particular project. This was the big one that had all the transactions. So we had a bunch of billings out there, and you can drill into the details of those. Again, we haven't talked a lot about filters, but we can filter on various pieces. I can say I just want to see city, and I want to say that's my customer name, and it just pulls out the city manufacturing invoices that were related to that project. And then you can quickly, send and resend these invoices and documents. So as a big part of the project piece is obviously the accounting with the customer, supporting him, his invoicing and his understanding of the project and why he's being billed and what he's being billed for is all built into this project management overview. Okay. Again, just kind of wanted to tease you a little bit with that to really kind of differentiate us. I could start to do a quote to cash and a purchase to pay scenario. I think it's going to be very much the same process that Chris displayed for you earlier and what Jeremy went through. Have that same capability, quote to cash, same scenario, create a quote, turn it into an order, or pick, pack, ship it, invoice it, create a payment journal, pay it off. The system will do all the same applications as kind of a step through function. I think that's pretty common in most of the industries that you would be involved in. So again, the pieces I think that differentiate us are the production capability, very detailed, very tracking cost analysis on products that you're building and resources you're using in terms of building that. Project management in terms of projects that you're doing for customers, services you're supplying inside of those projects, costs and expenses that are being allocated to those projects to understand, end of the day, are these projects being profitable for you? Or are you needing, if you're lacking control, this is the type of applications you would need. So we're going to talk a little bit about how F&O is a little bit different. Not really different here. I think Jeremy talked a bit about licensing a bit. Business Central is very much similar here. We'll have full licenses in terms of a user that's going to use a lot of the application, going to do full transactions, create, process, and post, if you will, the transaction through its complete transaction lifecycle. If people aren't doing that, if people are just what we would label team members, they're just going to do certain activities. They're going to maybe do part of the shipping process. They're in the warehouse. They're going to do part of the production process. They're in the production facility. Then they maybe just be a team member and maybe some of the things just as basic as logging their time in terms of logging in and out of the warehouse and they come to work, or logging on and off a production process as they do each of the processes in a BOM route scenario. So we have that capability. So you don't have to have everybody licensed as full users is basically the statement I would make. And then we'll talk about how we work to get you a quote in terms of how many users you have, and really we'd help you assess those users to see what level they fit at. And then there's the light users or device users, which is the kind of the shared environment. I've got a shared handheld device in the warehouse that I'm shipping with. My warehouse workers are using. So maybe they only use a light user or device, application device license. So that multiple guys as they go in and out of the warehouse are going to grab that gun and scan and update information inside the warehouse system. So they could be a light user there as well. And then kind of just a general statement why Dynamics 365 for F&O. You start with what you need. I mean, a big process, and I think Chris will reiterate this kind of in the closing, is that we're land and expand. We'll do what you need today. We try to come in and solve whatever your pain point is today, show you the fit, show you the application, try to drive some ROI so that you see some benefit coming back. And then we say, okay, what's the next step? Okay, we've solved that issue. We're moving further. We're going to take you through the application and apply more of it as we go, based on budget, obviously, but we're going to move through that. We can get you into these products and we can get you through the full level of applications and the best performance and best return on your investment. So greater productivity is a big measurement. Obviously, if you're bottlenecked in certain processes, those are some of the things we'd come in and show you how we could work through that. The built-in intelligence that we've talked about from the various levels of IoT, Power BI, Excel integration, those type of things, that's going to save time and that's going to make people more productive, and that generally affects your bottom line. You're going to get more done with less resource. And then be ready for growth, which in today's environment looks like everybody's kind of moving out that way. So if you're planning for an expansion, an acquisition, you're talking about, taking on a new, bigger customer, you're trying to sell yourself into the marketplace at a different level, you be prepared to be able to deliver that quality, that level of service that you're committing to. And that's where our tools will really allow you to do that. And again, allow you to take that step in the next step of your organization.